She saw them through the window before they saw her. That single moment standing on the sidewalk outside Lumiere, the restaurant where she'd celebrated every anniversary for the past 8 years, changed everything. Not because her husband was dining with another woman. Not even because his hand was covering hers across the white tablecloth, his thumb tracing small circles on her wrist. The way he used to do with Victoria's hand when they were young, and still believed in forever. It was the way he was looking at her. That look, the one Victoria hadn't seen directed at her in 3 years. Maybe 4. The softness around his eyes, the slight upward curve of his mouth, the complete and utter presence. As if this woman, this stranger with her copper-red hair and emerald dress, was the only person who existed in his universe. Victoria stood there, frozen, shopping bags from Bergdorf's cutting into her palms. The December cold bit through her cashmere coat, but she felt nothing. A cab honked. A couple brushed past her, laughing. The city moved around her like water around a stone, and she couldn't breathe. She should have walked away. She should have turned around, gone home to their penthouse on Fifth Avenue, and pretended she'd seen nothing. That's what the old Victoria would have done, the Victoria who'd spent 8 years being the perfect wife. The perfect hostess, the perfect accessory to Julian Ashford's glittering empire. But something inside her cracked. Before she could stop herself, Victoria pushed through Lumiere's heavy glass door. 3 months earlier, everything had been perfect. Or at least Victoria had believed it was perfect. Isn't that always the way? We convince ourselves that the cracks in the foundation are just character, that the distance is just temporary, that love is supposed to evolve into something quieter, calmer, less passionate. She'd met Julian Ashford at a charity gala in Manhattan when she was 26. He was 32, already a legend in venture capital, with a reputation for turning failing companies into billion-dollar success stories. He had that quality some men possess, an energy that makes everyone in the room unconsciously lean toward them, hungry for approval, for attention, for just a moment of being seen. Victoria had been working as a senior curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, passionate about Renaissance art, and lost in her world of beauty and history. She wasn't looking for a billionaire. She wasn't looking for anyone, really. But Julian had approached her during the silent auction, made an intelligent comment about the Caravaggio reproduction on display, and within 10 minutes she was laughing harder than she had in years. "You're different," he'd told her on their 3rd date, over wine at a small Italian place in the village back when he still liked small places, before everything had to be Michelin-starred and exclusive. "Everyone I meet wants something from me, you just want to talk about art." "Is that so unusual?" she'd asked. "In my world?" "Yes." He'd reached across the table and taken her hand. "Marry me, Victoria," she'd laughed. "We've known each other for 3 weeks. I know what I want. I always have. That's why I'm successful." His blue eyes had locked onto hers with an intensity that made her shiver. "I want you. I want this feeling. I want to come home to someone who sees me, not just what I can provide." 6 months later, she walked down the aisle in a Vera Wang gown that cost more than her parents' house. The wedding was featured in Vogue. 250 guests, mostly Julian's business associates and social connections. Her family, her mother, father, and younger brother David, had looked uncomfortable the entire time. Out of place among the millionaires and celebrities. "You sure about this, Vic?" David had whispered before walking her down the aisle. Their father had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving David to take on the role despite being only 24. "I love him," she'd said. And she had, desperately, completely. The first year of marriage was a fairy tale. Julian took her to Paris, to Rome, to Tokyo. They made love in 5-star hotels and laughed over room service at 3 a.m. He surprised her with first editions of her favorite books, with private tours of museums after hours, with small moments of thoughtfulness that showed he was paying attention. But then Ashford Ventures hit its major breakthrough. Julian's investment in a biotech startup resulted in a groundbreaking cancer treatment, and overnight his net worth jumped from impressive to astronomical. The media loved him. Forbes put him on the cover. He was invited to speak at Davos, at TED, at the White House. And slowly, so slowly she didn't notice until it was too late, he disappeared. Not physically. He still came home most nights, still slept beside her, still showed up for the important events. But the man who had loved her really loved her. Not just the idea of her, that man vanished into a whirlwind of meetings, acquisitions, board positions, and an ever-expanding empire. "I'm building something," he'd say when she complained about his absence. I'm doing this for us, Victoria. For our future. We don't need more money, she'd argue. We have enough for 10 lifetimes. It's not about money. It's about legacy, impact, changing the world. How do you compete with changing the world? So Victoria adapted. She quit her job at the Met. Julian had suggested it would be easier, less stressful, and besides, didn't she want to enjoy life instead of working? She threw herself into charity work, into planning elaborate dinner parties for Julian's business associates, into maintaining the perfect home, the perfect appearance, the perfect life. She had everything. A penthouse worth $30 million. A closet full of designer clothes. Invitations to every exclusive event in New York City. Jewelry that required its own insurance policy. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped recognizing herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her each morning was polished, elegant, and utterly hollow. The week before Victoria saw them at Lumiere, she tried to talk to Julian about it. It was a Sunday evening, rare because he was actually home. They were in the living room of their penthouse, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Central Park. The trees were bare, skeletal against the early December sky. Victoria had poured them both wine, a Chateau Margaux that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and settled beside him on their white Italian leather sofa. Julian, she'd started carefully. I've been thinking. He was scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. I want to go back to work. Maybe not full-time at the Met, but consulting. You make it sound trivial. What you do is essential. To your career. To our life together. He picked up his wine, his tone shifting into something gentler, but no less dismissive. You're just feeling restless. Why don't you plan a trip? Take Emma to the Maldives or something. Relax. Emma, her best friend since college. Now married to one of Julian's business partners. Emma, who also no longer worked, who also spent her days maintaining an elaborate lifestyle that looked perfect from the outside. I don't want a vacation. I want purpose. Julian had sighed, setting down his wine and taking her hand. The gesture should have been comforting, but it felt patronizing. Victoria, you're upset. I understand. I've been working too much, I know. Tell you what, let's plan something special for our anniversary next week. Lumiere, your favorite, just the two of us. We'll reconnect. She'd wanted to push harder, to make him understand that a nice dinner wasn't going to fix the emptiness growing inside her like a void. But he kissed her forehead, picked up his phone again, and the moment had evaporated. Lumiere sounds nice, she'd said quietly. He hadn't heard her. He was already back in his phone, his mind already somewhere else. Their anniversary came and went. Julian had forgotten. When Victoria had gently reminded him that evening, he'd looked genuinely apologetic. God, Victoria, I'm so sorry. The Singapore deal is closing this week. Complete chaos. We'll do it next week, I promise. Tuesday? I'll make a reservation. She'd smiled and said it was fine, and maybe it would have been fine. Maybe they would have gone to dinner on Tuesday, had a pleasant evening, and she would have continued in this half-life indefinitely, never quite happy but never quite miserable enough to do anything about it. But Tuesday evening, Victoria had been walking home from a board meeting for the Ashford Foundation, a charity Julian had started primarily for tax benefits and good PR when she'd passed Lumiere. The restaurant's warm golden light had spilled onto the cold December street, and on impulse, she'd glanced inside. Just a glance. Just a moment of curiosity, wondering if Julian had remembered after all, if maybe he was inside waiting to surprise her, and there he was, with her. The maître d' at Lumiere knew Victoria by name, of course. How many times had she dined there with Julian? How many business dinners had she attended, playing the gracious wife while men talked about things that excluded her? Mrs. Ashford, Michel said, his professional smile faltering slightly when he saw her face. We weren't expecting you this evening. I can see that, Victoria said softly. Her eyes were locked on the table by the window. Julian still hadn't noticed her. He was too absorbed in the woman across from him. Too lost in whatever story she was telling that made him laugh, really laugh. His head thrown back, genuine joy on his face. How long had it been since she'd made him laugh like that? Mrs. Ashford, Michel began again, more urgently. Perhaps, but Victoria was already moving. She crossed the restaurant floor in a dream state, distantly aware of other diners glancing up, of whispered recognition. Everyone knew who she was. Julian Ashford's wife. The woman in the society pages, always perfectly dressed, always smiling beside her powerful husband. She reached their table. Julian looked up. For a single heartbeat, everything stopped. His face cycled through expressions so quickly she almost couldn't track them: surprise, confusion, fear, guilt, and finally, something like resignation. The woman turned. Up close, she was younger than Victoria had thought. Late 20s, maybe. Beautiful in that effortless way some women are, with clear skin and bright eyes, and the kind of confidence that comes from being desired. She didn't look ashamed. She looked curious. Victoria, Julian said, standing quickly. This isn't what it looks like? Victoria finished. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, too calm, too steady. That's the line you're going with? The woman, the mistress, because that's what she was, wasn't she? Watch this exchange with unsettling composure. She didn't reach for her purse, didn't make excuses to leave. She just sat there, wineglass in hand, observing. Let's not do this here, Julian said quietly. Please. Do what? Interrupt your date? Victoria looked at the table. 2 bottles of wine, both expensive. Appetizers half-eaten. The main courses hadn't arrived yet. They'd been here a while. This wasn't a business dinner that had run late. This was planned. Deliberate. I'm so sorry. I should have called first. Oh, wait, this is supposed to be our dinner. For our anniversary. Remember? Something flickered in Julian's eyes. Victoria, you forgot, she continued. You forgot our anniversary. But you didn't forget this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is. My name is Isabel, the woman said suddenly. Her voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest hint of a French accent. Isabel Laurent. And before you paint me as some villain in your marriage, you should know that Julian told me you two were separated. The world tilted. He told you what? Isabel's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. He said you were living separate lives. That the divorce was just a matter of paperwork and timing. That you'd both agreed to it quietly, to avoid media attention. Victoria looked at Julian, really looked at him. This man she'd loved for 8 years. This man she'd built her entire life around. This man who had promised her forever, and then slowly, methodically, erased her from his existence. Is that true? She asked. Did you tell her we were separated? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Answer me, Julian. It's complicated, he said finally. Victoria laughed. The sound was sharp, broken. Several nearby diners glanced over. She didn't care anymore. Let them look. Let them see the perfect couple's perfect life shatter. It's really not complicated at all, she said. You're cheating on me. And you, such a coward that you told your mistress we were already done so you could avoid feeling guilty about it. Victoria, please. How long? The question came out as a whisper. How long has this been going on? Julian's jaw tightened. He glanced at Isabel, and something unspoken passed between them. A look of such intimacy that Victoria felt it like a physical blow. 6 months, he said quietly. 6 months. Victoria's mind raced backward, trying to pinpoint when it had started. 6 months ago was June. What had been happening in June? Nothing special. Just another month in their hollow marriage. Just another stretch of days where she'd woken up alone, eaten breakfast alone, attended events alone even when Julian was physically beside her. I need to sit down, she said. Before Julian could stop her, she pulled out the empty chair at their table and sat. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him squirm. Let everyone in this restaurant see what was happening. Victoria, don't make a scene, Julian hissed. A scene? You're fucking someone else and lying about it, but I'm making a scene? Isabel cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps I should go. No, Victoria said sharply. You stay. I want to understand this. I want to understand how my husband has been living a double life for half a year while I planned his parties, and managed his foundation and smiled for photographers, and played the perfect wife. You checked out years ago, Julian said suddenly. The words came out harsh, defensive. You've been going through the motions, Victoria. Don't act like this marriage was perfect before Isabel. I checked out? Victoria's voice rose. You disappeared. You chose your empire over everything else. I tried to talk to you, tried to connect with you, and you treated me like I was an inconvenience. Because you wanted me to be someone I'm not. Julian leaned forward, his voice low and intense. You wanted the man from the beginning, the one who took you to small restaurants and talked about art for hours. But I'm not that person anymore. I've built something massive, something that matters, and you've never supported it. You've just complained that I'm not paying enough attention to you. The words hit like slaps. Victoria stared at him, this stranger wearing her husband's face. I supported everything you did, she said quietly. I gave up my career. I gave up my identity. I became whatever you needed me to be. And it still wasn't enough. You gave up your career because you wanted to, Julian countered. I never forced you. You suggested it. You made it clear that my work was less important than being available for your needs. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Isabel set down her wineglass with a soft click. I think, she said carefully, that perhaps you two have been incompatible for quite some time. From what Julian has told me, you've both been unhappy. Sometimes relationships run their course. Victoria turned to her slowly. You don't get to have an opinion on my marriage. Technically, Isabel said, with that same unnerving calm, I'm part of it now. Whether you like it or not. The audacity of it stunned Victoria into silence. Julian rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up, he seemed tired, older. I didn't want you to find out this way. I was going to tell you. After the holidays. I was trying to figure out how to do it right. Do what right? The divorce you've apparently already promised her? Yes, he said simply. I want a divorce, Victoria. I've wanted one for over a year. There it was. The truth, finally. After all the lies, all the pretending, all the elaborate performance of their marriage, the truth, stark and brutal. You wanted a divorce for over a year, Victoria repeated numbly. But you never mentioned it. You just started fucking someone else? I met Isabel at a conference in Paris. I didn't plan it. But when we started talking, really talking, I realized what I'd been missing. What we've been missing. Passion. Connection. Partnership with someone who understands my work, who's excited about the same things I am. What does she do? Victoria asked. She wasn't sure why it mattered, but suddenly she needed to know. I'm a venture capitalist, Isabel said. I run a fund focused on European tech startups. Julian and I were both speaking on the same panel about emerging markets. Of course she was in his world. Of course she spoke his language. Of course she was everything Victoria had failed to be. So you found someone better suited to you, Victoria said. And instead of having the courage to end our marriage first, you just moved on, but kept me around for appearances. Julian's silence was answer enough. Victoria stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to remain upright. I'll make this easy for you. I'll file for divorce tomorrow. You can have your new life with your new partner who's so much better than me. Victoria, don't. She held up a hand. Don't pretend you're sorry. Don't pretend any of this is hard for you. You've already moved on. You did that months ago. She turned to leave, then paused. One last question burned in her mind. That night last week, when I tried to talk to you about going back to work. You made that reservation here, promised we'd reconnect. Were you planning to tell me then? Or were you going to cancel again and bring her instead? Julian's face told her everything. You bastard, she whispered. Then she walked out of Lumiere with her head high and her heart in pieces. The December night air hit her like ice water. Victoria stood on the sidewalk, suddenly aware that she was still holding her shopping bags from Bergdorf's. She'd bought a dress for the New Year's Eve party they were supposed to host. A Valentino gown in midnight blue. She dropped the bags in the nearest trash can. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Please don't do anything rash. Let's talk when we've both calmed down. She blocked his number. Another text, this time from an unknown number. Isabel, I know you hate me right now, but I thought you should know this wasn't just an affair. We're in love. I'm sorry you're hurt, but Julian deserves to be happy. I hope eventually you can understand that. Victoria stared at the message. The sheer arrogance of it. The absolute lack of self-awareness. This woman had been sleeping with her husband for 6 months and had the audacity to text her about Julian deserving happiness. She didn't block the number. Instead, she typed back, "Thank you for the honesty. I hope you enjoy the life I built for him." Every dinner party, every social connection, every careful cultivation of his image, that was me. You're inheriting my work. Enjoy. Then she blocked that number too. A cab pulled up to the curb. The previous passengers were getting out, and the driver looked at her expectantly. Where to, lady? Where to? That was the question, wasn't it? She couldn't go home. Home was the penthouse Julian owned. Home was filled with furniture Julian had chosen, art Julian had bought, a life Julian had designed with her as an accessory. The Surrey Hotel, she heard herself say. She climbed into the cab, watching Lumiere as golden light recede through the rear window. Inside, Julian and Isabel were probably discussing what had just happened. Maybe they were relieved. Maybe they were already planning their future together, free from the inconvenience of his unwanted wife. At the hotel, Victoria paid cash for a suite. The staff recognized her. She'd organized several events here for the foundation, but they were discreet, professional. They didn't ask why Mrs. Ashford was checking in alone at 9 p.m. with no luggage. In the suite, Victoria finally let herself feel it, all of it. The betrayal, the humiliation, the grief for the life she thought was hers. She stood at the window overlooking Madison Avenue and let the tears come. 8 years. She'd given Julian 8 years. The best years of her 20s and early 30s. She'd molded herself into what he needed, sacrificed her dreams for his, accepted loneliness as the price of his success. And he'd replaced her, easily, effortlessly, with someone more like him. Her phone rang. David, her brother. She declined the call. She couldn't talk to anyone right now. It rang again. Emma, her best friend. She declined that too. The calls and texts kept coming. Word was spreading, of course it was. Someone at Lumiere had probably already posted about the scene on social media. By morning, it would be in page 6. Billionaire Julian Ashford's marriage implodes in public confrontation. Victoria silenced her phone and poured herself a vodka from the minibar. Then another. She wasn't typically a drinker. Julian didn't like it when she drank too much at events. But right now, she needed the numbness. Somewhere around midnight, sitting on the floor of her hotel suite, Victoria realized something. She had nothing. Oh, she had access to money. Their accounts were joint, and Julian was wealthy enough that he'd probably be generous in the divorce. She had her trust fund from her grandmother, modest but comfortable. She had clothes and jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but she had no job. No career to return to after 3 years away. No sense of identity beyond being Julian Ashford's wife. Even her friendships were mostly his friends' wives. Her charity work was through his foundation. Her social life revolved around his business. He'd taken everything. Not by force, but by slow erosion. By making her dependent, making her small, making her forget who she'd been before him. And she'd let him. That was the worst part. She'd let it happen. She'd chosen comfort over authenticity, security over purpose. She'd traded herself for a gilded cage and convinced herself it was love. Well, not anymore. Victoria stood, the vodka making her movements slightly unsteady. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was smeared, her carefully styled hair disheveled. She looked like what she was, a woman whose life had just imploded. But underneath the mess, underneath the pain, she saw something else. Anger. Not the hot, impulsive anger of the confrontation at Lumiere. This was different. Colder, more purposeful. This was the anger of someone who'd been diminished and was done being small. Julian thought he could just move on with his new life, his new love, his new version of happiness built on the bones of their marriage. He thought she'd go quietly, take her settlement, fade into obscurity while he and Isabel lived out their perfect partnership. He was wrong. Victoria pulled out her laptop and opened her email. She began typing. To David Patterson from Victoria Ashford's subject. I need you, David. I'm sorry I didn't answer your calls. Something happened tonight, and I need my lawyer brother's help. Not just legal help, I need you to be ruthless. Julian's been having an affair for 6 months. He wants a divorce. I'm going to give him one, but I'm going to make sure I don't leave this marriage with nothing but money. I helped build his empire. I was the face of his foundation, the host of his networking events, the bridge to social connections that opened doors for him. I may not have been in the boardroom, but I was essential to his success. And I'm going to make sure the world and the divorce court knows it. Call me tomorrow. We have work to do. Victoria, she hit send, then opened a new email. To Robert Chen and Associates from Victoria Ashford subject. Representation, Mr. Chen. You handled the Whitmore divorce last year. I remember the articles about how you ensured Mrs. Whitmore received equity in her husband's company, not just liquid assets, arguing that her social and emotional labor had contributed to the business's success. I need that same representation. I'm Victoria Ashford, and I'm about to become the most high-profile divorce case in New York. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Money is not an object, and I'm prepared to fight. Best, Victoria Ashford. She sent that too, then opened a blank document and started writing. Every event she'd organized, every connection she'd made, Every dinner party where deals were discussed, every charity function that had boosted Julian's reputation. She documented all of it, creating a detailed record of her invisible labor. Hours passed. The vodka wore off, replaced by coffee from room service and an adrenaline that made her hands shake. But she kept writing. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, Victoria had a 90-page document outlining her contributions to Julian's business success. It wouldn't all be admissible in court, but it was a start. It was evidence. It was proof that she'd been more than just a decorative wife. Her phone lit up with messages she'd missed while in work mode. Emma, frantic with worry. David, confirming he'd received her email and would call first thing. Several society friends, pretending to check on her but really fishing for gossip. And one message from an unknown number that had somehow gotten through her blocks. You think you can hurt him, but you can't. Julian Ashford is untouchable. Take your settlement and disappear with dignity. Isabel, it had to be. Who else would be so bold? Victoria stared at the message for a long moment. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. She typed back, "Watch me." Then she finally blocked that number properly and turned off her phone. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across Central Park. Somewhere in the city, Julian was probably waking up, maybe in Isabel's bed, maybe planning how to control the narrative of their divorce. He'd underestimated her. They always did, didn't they? Men like Julian, who thought their wives were decorative, dependent, easily dismissed. He thought she'd be hurt and humiliated, yes, but ultimately cooperative. After all, she'd been cooperative for 8 years. But Victoria Patterson, she reclaimed her maiden name in her mind, wasn't going to be cooperative anymore. She was going to be very, very expensive. The call from Robert Chun came at 7 a.m. Victoria was still awake, still working on her document, still running on nothing but rage and black coffee. "Mrs. Ashford, I received your email." His voice was crisp, efficient, with the particular quality of someone who'd made a career out of other people's disasters. "I've done some preliminary research. Your case is ... interesting. Interesting good or interesting complicated? Both. Your husband is worth approximately $4.2 billion. The prenuptial agreement you signed is fairly standard, but has some vulnerabilities we can exploit. However, the real value here isn't in attacking the prenup, it's in establishing your contribution to the business." Victoria's heart began to pound. "Can we do that?" "It's difficult but not impossible. The key is proving that your social capital, your networking, your management of his public image directly contributed to specific business deals or opportunities." "Do you have documentation?" "I'm creating it now. Every event, every connection I made for him, every foundation board meeting where I cultivated relationships with investors." "Good. I'll need all of it." "But Mrs. Ashford, I need you to understand something." Chan paused. "Your husband will fight dirty. Men with that kind of money and power don't like losing, especially not to their wives. He'll try to paint you as a gold digger, as someone who contributed nothing. He'll make you the villain. Let him try. There's something else. I did some digging this morning. Isabel Laurent, the woman he's been seeing. She's not just some mistress. She runs Laurent Ventures, a very successful European fund. She and your husband have been collaborating on several deals over the past 6 months. They're planning to merge their companies." The revelation hit Victoria like a punch. It wasn't just an affair, it was a business partnership. Julian wasn't just replacing her as a wife, he was replacing her with someone who could actually be useful to him professionally. "So this was never really about love," Victoria said quietly. "It was about finding a better business partner who he also wanted to fuck." "Essentially, yes. But here's where it gets interesting for us. If they've been mixing business and personal relationships, there might be conflicts of interest. Deals made while he was still married to you, using marital assets or connections you helped build. We might be able to argue that you're entitled to a percentage of those ventures." For the first time since entering Lumiere the night before, Victoria smiled. A real smile. "When can we meet?" "My office. 9 a.m. Bring everything you have. By 8 a.m. Victoria had checked out of the Surrey and taken a cab to her brother's apartment in Brooklyn. David opened the door in sweatpants and a Columbia Law t-shirt, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. "Jesus, Vic, you look terrible. I haven't slept." She pushed past him into the small but comfortable apartment. It was such a contrast to the penthouse lived in, real, with mismatched furniture and books piled everywhere. "I need to shower and borrow clothes. I have a meeting with Robert Chen at 9. The shark?" David's eyebrows rose. You move fast. I have to. Julian's already 3 steps ahead of me. He's been planning this for months, David. The affair, the business merger with his mistress, all of it. David put a hand on her shoulder, his expression shifting from concern to something harder. Okay, we're going to destroy him, but first coffee. And you need to eat something. While Victoria showered, David made breakfast eggs and toast, simple but necessary. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Dinner the night before? No, she'd skipped it, planning to have a light meal at Lumiere with Julian before bed. How quickly a life could fracture. She emerged in borrowed clothes David's ex-girlfriend had left behind some items that more or less fit. Jeans and a sweater, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked nothing like the polished Victoria Ashford from the society pages. She looked like herself again. Tell me everything, David said, sliding eggs onto a plate. Leave nothing out, so she did. She told him about the slow erosion of her marriage, about giving up her career, about becoming invisible. She told him about the confrontation, about Isabel's audacity, about Julian's admission that he'd wanted a divorce for over a year. That son of a bitch, David muttered. I never liked him. Too smooth, too calculated. But you loved him, so I kept my mouth shut. You should have said something. Would you have listened? Victoria thought about that. Would she have? Probably not. She'd been so dazzled by Julian, so caught up in the fairy tale of being chosen by someone so powerful and successful. No, she admitted. But I wish you tried. David reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We're going to make him regret this. Not just legally, though. Robert Chen will absolutely tear him apart financially. But we're going to make sure everyone knows who Julian Ashford really is. A man who used his wife for years and then discarded her for a younger model with better business connections. I don't want revenge, Victoria said, then paused. Actually, that's a lie. I absolutely want revenge. But more than that, I want to remember who I was before him. I want my life back. You'll get both, David promised. Robert Chan's office was in a sleek building in Midtown, all glass and steel and quiet money. His receptionist, a woman who looked like she could kill you with just a look, ushered Victoria into a conference room where Chan was waiting. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 45, with silver-threaded hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind designer glasses. He stood when she entered, shook her hand with a firm grip. Mrs. Ashford, thank you for coming. I've had my team working since our call. Please, sit. He opened a laptop and turned it to face her. On the screen was a detailed timeline. This, he said, is your husband's net worth growth over the past 8 years. Note the significant jumps. Here, when he secured the Peterson healthcare investment, that was preceded by a dinner party you hosted where he met Anderson Peterson. Here, when Ashford Ventures went public, that was accompanied by a major PR campaign that featured you prominently as the philanthropic, grounded wife who kept him humble. Victoria stared at the chart. She'd never seen it laid out like this, never understood the direct correlation between her work and his success. And here, Chun continued, pulling up another document, is the Laurent-Ashford merger proposal. Filed 3 weeks ago. They were planning to combine their venture capital firms into a single entity valued at over $6 billion. The proposal names Isabel Laurent as co-CEO. 3 weeks ago, Victoria repeated. He was going to announce this after the holidays, after telling me he wanted a divorce. Correct. But here rests the problem for them. Some of the companies involved in this merger are companies your husband invested in using funds and connections from your joint financial life. There's also the matter of the foundation. The Ashford Foundation? Yes. You're listed as co-founder and you've been the operational director for 5 years. The foundation has significant assets and has been used to create business connections for your husband. If we can prove that the foundation's work directly benefited Ashford Ventures, we can argue that you're entitled to compensation for that labor. Victoria's mind was racing. The foundation was my life for 5 years. Every grant, every partnership, every event, I managed all of it. Then you're not just a wife seeking alimony. You're a business partner seeking your share of the enterprise. Chine leaned back, a slight smile on his face. This is going to be a very expensive divorce for Mr. Ashford. How expensive? If we play this right, potentially $1 billion plus ongoing equity in several ventures plus control of the foundation. The number was staggering. Victoria had expected a generous settlement. Julian was wealthy enough that even 10 or 20 million wouldn't dent his fortune. But $1 billion? That was real money. That was power. What do I need to do? First, we file for divorce today. We beat him to it, which matters psychologically and strategically. Second, we immediately request full financial disclosure. Third, we go public with your side of the story before he can control the narrative. Public? Victoria hesitated. You mean ... media? I mean everything. Interviews, articles, a carefully crafted campaign that shows you as a woman who sacrificed her career and identity to support her husband, only to be betrayed and discarded. The public loves a wronged woman, especially when she's fighting back against a billionaire. Victoria thought about the years she'd spent avoiding controversy, being the perfect society wife, never making waves. Julian hated scandal. It was one of his rules: keep everything private, keep everything perfect. Fuck his rules. Do it, she said. All of it. The divorce filing hit the news within hours. Victoria Ashford was divorcing Julian Ashford, citing irreconcilable differences and seeking a substantial portion of his business assets. The story exploded. By noon, Victoria's phone, she'd gotten a new one that morning, was flooded with interview requests. CNN, CNBC, The Times, The Post, everyone wanted to talk to her. Chun's PR team coordinated everything, carefully selecting which outlets would get access. Remember, Chun's publicist coached her: you're not angry, you're disappointed and hurt, but you're strong. You're a woman reclaiming her power. Don't trash talk him directly, just tell your truth and let people draw their own conclusions. The first interview was with Vanity Fair, a long-form piece that would run in next month's issue, but would be posted online in excerpts. The journalist, a woman named Patricia Greenwald, who'd made her name covering high society divorces, met Victoria at a quiet restaurant in Soho. Mrs. Ashford, or should I call you Victoria? Victoria is fine. I'm reclaiming my identity. Patricia's eyes lit up. That was exactly the kind of quote she wanted. Tell me about your marriage. When did you first realize something was wrong? Victoria had prepared for this, but sitting across from Patricia, she found the truth spilling out more easily than she'd expected. I think I realized it about 2 years ago, but I didn't want to admit it. My husband had become someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe I always refused to see who he really was, someone who valued achievement and success over human connection. I became an accessory to his life instead of a partner in it. You gave up your career as a curator at the Metropolitan Museum. Do you regret that? Yes and no. I don't regret supporting my husband's dreams. I regret losing myself in the process. I regret believing that love meant making yourself small so someone else could be big. There are rumors about an affair. Can you comment? Victoria paused. Chun had advised her to be careful here. Don't confirm details that could affect the legal case, but don't deny what was already known. I discovered my husband had been in a relationship with someone else for several months. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal, it was realizing he'd checked out of our marriage long before, but never had the courage to tell me. He let me continue playing the role of devoted wife while he built a new life. With Isabel Laurent? I won't comment on specific names. But I will say this: the woman he chose to replace me is someone who can benefit his business in ways I couldn't. It makes me wonder if our entire marriage was just a transaction that stopped being profitable for him. Patricia scribbled notes furiously. That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a realization. My husband is brilliant at seeing value and maximizing return on investment. I think he saw me the same way. And when I stopped providing adequate returns, he found a better investment. The interview continued for 2 hours. By the end, Victoria felt drained but also strangely lighter. For 8 years, she'd kept everything inside, maintained the perfect facade. Now, for the first time, she was telling the truth. The excerpts posted online that evening, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded. #Victoria Ashford trended worldwide. Women shared their own stories of losing themselves in relationships, of being made small by ambitious partners. Surprisingly, many men expressed support too, recognizing the pattern of emotional neglect. But not everyone was sympathetic. Julian's camp moved fast. By the next morning, articles appeared painting Victoria as a gold digger who demarried for money and was now trying to cash out. Anonymous sources close to the couple claimed she'd been distant and cold, that Julian had been unhappy for years, that she'd refused to adapt to his success. And then Isabel Laurent gave an interview. Victoria was in Chun's office reviewing financial documents when his assistant rushed in with a tablet. You need to see this. It was a video interview with Forbes. Isabel Laurent, looking impossibly composed in a designer suit, sitting in what appeared to be a modern office with London's skyline behind her. Ms. Laurent, you've been named in the Ashford divorce. What's your response? Isabel smiled sadly. It's unfortunate that Victoria Ashford is using me as a scapegoat for her failing marriage. Julian and I are colleagues, and yes, we've developed a personal relationship. But that happened only after his marriage was essentially over. Victoria knows this, but she's choosing to play the victim for sympathy and financial gain. She claims the affair had been going on for 6 months. Julian and I became close over the past 6 months, yes. But it wasn't romantic until recently, until he'd made the decision to leave his marriage. We tried to be respectful of his situation. Clearly, that wasn't enough for Victoria. The interviewer leaned forward. Some are calling you a homewrecker. I prefer to think of myself as someone who found a genuine connection with another person. Julian Ashford is brilliant, driven, passionate about his work. His wife never understood that side of him. I do. We're building something together that's not just romantic but professionally revolutionary. Sometimes the right person comes along at a complicated time. And the merger between Laurent Ventures and Ashford Ventures? Pure business decision based on strategic alignment. The personal relationship is separate, but Isabel's smile suggested otherwise. Victoria watched the video 3 times, her anger building with each viewing. She's lying, Victoria said flatly. Or at least she's revising history. Julian told her we were separated. She didn't know we were still together until I showed up at that restaurant. Chun was already typing on his laptop. Do you have proof of that? Any messages, any evidence that Isabel believed you were separated? Victoria thought back to that night. Isabel's words. Julian told me you two were separated. That the divorce was just a matter of paperwork. Only her own statement to me. She seemed genuinely surprised to see me. But I have no recording, no texts. Then it's her word against yours. And right now, she's winning the PR battle. She's positioned herself as the successful woman who found love, not the mistress who destroyed a marriage. David, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly stood. Wait, Victoria, you said Julian told Isabel you were separated, right? That the divorce was just paperwork? Yes, but he told you he'd wanted a divorce for over a year. That means he made the decision at least a year ago, but he didn't tell you. He just ... kept you around. Chun's eyes sharpened. So there is a significant gap between when he decided he wanted out and when he acted on it. Why? Victoria thought about it. Why had Julian kept up the pretense? Why had he stayed in the marriage when he was already mentally and emotionally gone? Then it hit her. The foundation, she said slowly. We launched the Ashford Foundation 3 years ago. It's been essential to his business networking. And 2 years ago, we started the annual Ashford Gala, the biggest charity event in New York. Anyone attends. It's become a must-attend event for tech investors, politicians, celebrities. And you organized all of it, Chun said, understanding dawning. Every detail, every guest list, every partnership. The foundation gave Julian access to people he couldn't reach through normal business channels. It made him not just rich but respectable, philanthropic, human. David was pacing now, energized. So he kept you around because you were useful. He wanted out, but he needed you to maintain his social standing and business connections. You were still working for him, just not in a way that you realized. That's not just cold, Chun said. That's calculating. And it's exactly the narrative we need. Julian Ashford didn't just cheat on his wife. He exploited her labor while carrying on an affair, keeping her in the dark so she'd continue to be useful to him. Victoria felt sick. All those months of trying to connect with Julian, of feeling like she was failing as a wife, of wondering what was wrong with her, he'd known. He'd already decided. He'd just been using her. How do we prove this? She asked. Chun smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The gala is in 3 weeks. The invitations went out 2 months ago with both your names on them. Sponsorships were secured using the foundation's reputation, the reputation you built. And I'm willing to bet that some of Ashford Ventures' biggest recent deals were made with people you invited to that gala. They were, Victoria confirmed. Last year, I invited Catherine Mills from Mills Capital. She and Julian hit it off, and 6 months later, she invested $200 million in one of his biotech companies. Perfect. We're going to document every single business connection that came through the foundation, through your social network, through events you organized. And we're going to assign a dollar value to each one. But the gala is still happening, Victoria said. I was supposed to run it, but obviously now. Now you're still going to run it, Sean interrupted. You're co-founder of that foundation. You've been the operational director for years. Julian can't just remove you without cause, and we're getting divorced isn't cause. The board would have to vote you out, and betting at least some of them will side with you once they know the full story. Victoria's mind was spinning. You want me to show up at the gala? While everyone knows we're getting divorced? I want you to host the gala. I want you to stand on that stage as the face of the Ashford Foundation and remind everyone that this was your creation, your work, your vision. Let Julian be the uncomfortable one for once. It was bold. It was risky. It was perfect. He'll fight it, Victoria said. Let him fight. Every time he tries to push you out, we document it. Every time he acts like you were nothing more than a trophy wife, we prove otherwise. By the time we're done, the court and the public will see Julian Ashford for exactly what he is, a man who built his empire on his wife's back and then tried to erase her from the story. The battle lines were drawn. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria threw herself into preparing for the gala with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She worked 18-hour days, coordinating with vendors, confirming RSVPs, managing the endless details that went into an event hosting 800 of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people. Julian tried to have her removed from the foundation board. The vote was 4-3 in her favor. Turns out, several board members had been quietly furious about his affair, particularly the women. He tried to cancel the gala entirely. Chan got an injunction preventing it, arguing that cancellation would damage the foundation's reputation and, by extension, Victoria's professional reputation. He tried to have his lawyers intimidate her into a quick settlement. Chun laughed at their offer, $50 million and a confidentiality agreement, and countered with $1.2 billion plus equity in several ventures, plus full control of the foundation. Julian's lawyers called it absurd. We'll see you in court, Chun had replied pleasantly. Throughout all of this, Victoria didn't see Julian once. They communicated only through lawyers. He'd moved out of the penthouse into Isabel's apartment in Tribeca, according to the gossip blogs, and Victoria had returned home to pack up her belongings. Walking through the penthouse felt surreal. Every room held memories, but they felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else's life. The living room where she'd hosted countless dinner parties. The bedroom where she'd slept alone more nights than not. The office where Julian had worked late, door closed, while she sat alone in the other room. She took only what was hers: clothes, jewelry, personal items. The art stayed. The furniture stayed. Let Julian keep the pretty cage he'd built. Emma came to help her pack. Her friend had been calling non-stop since the story broke, worried and supportive, and slightly horrified by the whole mess. I should have said something, Emma said, carefully wrapping a framed photo of Victoria and David. I knew you were unhappy. I knew Julian was barely present. But I thought, I don't know. I thought that's just what marriage to powerful men looked like. Is that what your marriage looks like? Victoria asked. Emma paused. She was married to Richard Chun, no relation to Robert, one of Julian's business partners. They had a similar lifestyle, the penthouse, the social obligations, the sense of being decorative. Sometimes Emma admitted quietly. But Richard doesn't have a mistress. At least I don't think he does. Do you know for certain? Emma's silence was answer enough. Can I ask you something? Are you happy? Her friend looked around the penthouse, at the expensive furniture and the $1,000,000 view and the life that looked so perfect from the outside. I don't know, she whispered. I stopped asking myself that a long time ago. Victoria pulled her into a hug. Then maybe it's time to start asking again. They finished packing in silence, both women lost in their own thoughts about the lives they de-built and the prices they de-paid for them. The night of the gala arrived. Victoria stood in front of the mirror in her hotel suite at the Surrey. She'd been staying there since the separation, finding comfort in the neutral space, and studied her reflection. She'd chosen her dress carefully. Not the Valentino she'd bought for New Year's. Not anything Julian would have chosen. Instead, she wore a crimson gown by a young designer she discovered through the Foundation's arts program, bold, dramatic, with a silhouette that commanded attention. Her hair was styled simply, her makeup understated but flawless. She looked powerful. She looked in control. She looked like someone who wasn't going to disappear quietly. David knocked on the door. He was her date for the evening, and he looked sharp in his tuxedo, though uncomfortable in the formal wear. "You ready for this?" he asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art location. Victoria had chosen years ago, when she still worked there, when she still remembered what it felt like to be passionate about something beyond maintaining appearances. As their car pulled up to the museum, Victoria saw the crowds. Photographers lined the red carpet. News crews filmed. This wasn't just a charity event anymore, it was theater. And everyone wanted to see the wronged wife's first public appearance since the divorce filing. "Last chance to back out," David murmured. Victoria squeezed his hand. Not a chance. She stepped out of the car, and the cameras exploded with flashes. Reporters shouted questions. "Victoria, how are you handling the divorce? Do you have any comment on Isabel Lawrence's interview? Are you still running the foundation?" She smiled graciously and kept walking, David's arm steady under hers. At the entrance, she paused and turned to face the cameras. "Thank you all for coming," she said clearly. "Tonight is about the Ashford Foundation's mission supporting arts education and providing opportunities for young artists. That work is bigger than any one person's personal drama. I hope you'll focus on the cause, not the gossip." It was perfect, gracious, mature, subtly reminding everyone that she was the foundation while positioning Julian's affair as a distraction from important work. Inside, the museum's great hall had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white orchids. A string quartet played near the Temple of Dender. Everywhere Victoria looked, she saw details she'd chosen, touches she'd added, proof of the work she'd poured into this event. And in the center of it all, near the bar, stood Julian. He was talking to a group of investors, looking relaxed and confident in his tuxedo. And beside him, her hand on his arm, was Isabel Lawrence in a stunning white gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. The message was clear. They were a couple now. This was official. She belonged here. For a moment, Victoria's resolve wavered. Seeing them together, so comfortable, so obviously connected, it brought back the pain of that night at Lumiere. The humiliation, the grief, but then Julian saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and Victoria watched surprise flicker across his face. He'd thought she wouldn't come. He'd thought she'd hide, wounded and embarrassed. She smiled at him, raised her champagne glass in a small salute, then turned away to greet a group of foundation board members, leaving him to wonder. The evening proceeded exactly as planned. Victoria worked the room like the professional she'd become, greeting donors, thanking sponsors, making sure everyone felt valued. She was charming, gracious, and completely in control. Several people approached her with barely veiled curiosity, fishing for details about the divorce. She deflected with practiced ease, redirecting conversations back to the foundation's work. But she couldn't avoid Julian forever. He cornered her near the Egyptian wing, away from the main crowds. Isabel was nowhere to be seen, probably networking with the European investors. "Victoria." His voice was strained. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do. This is inappropriate. You shouldn't be here." She laughed, the sound sharp. "I shouldn't be here? At the event I'd been planning for the past year? At the foundation I helped create and have been running? Tell me, Julian, which part of my own work am I not allowed to be present for? You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. For you, maybe. But you've had months to prepare for this transition, haven't you? You've been planning your exit, while I work to make you look good. So forgive me if I'm not more concerned about your comfort level." Julian's jaw tightened. The settlement offer was generous. The offer was insulting. $50 million for 8 years of my life? For building your social capital? For making you palatable to people who would have otherwise seen you as just another ruthless businessman? I made myself successful. You made yourself wealthy. I made you respectable. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. Every person in this room tonight knows me, trusts me, respects me. How many of them would have given you the time of day without my introduction? Without the foundation legitimizing you as someone who cared about more than just profit? That's ridiculous, is it? Let's test it. Let's see how many of your precious investors stick around when they realize you're the kind of man who uses his wife for years and then discards her. Let's see how your reputation holds up when people learn you kept me in the dark about wanting a divorce, so I'd keep working for you. Fear flashed in Julian's eyes. Quick but unmistakable. You're bluffing. Am I? We'll find out in court. Or you could make this easy and give me what I'm actually worth. $1 billion. Equity in the ventures I helped you secure. And full control of the foundation. You're insane. I'm finally seeing clearly. Victoria smiled. Enjoy your evening, Julian. Try not to let the guilt ruin Isabel's first gala. I'd hate for her to see the cracks already. She walked away, leaving him standing alone in the Egyptian wing, surrounded by artifacts from a civilization that had crumbled to dust thousands of years ago. The real surprise came during the speeches. Victoria had been scheduled to give the opening remarks, as she had every year. Julian's lawyers had tried to have her removed from the program, but Chun had blocked it. So there she stood, on stage in front of 800 people, with Julian and Isabel sitting at the main table, watching. Good evening, Victoria began, her voice clear and strong. Thank you all for being here tonight to support the Ashford Foundation's mission. She paused, looking out at the crowd. So many familiar faces. So many connections she'd built over years of work. 5 years ago, when we founded this organization, I had a vision. I wanted to create something that would give talented young artists the opportunities I had the chance to study, to grow, to pursue their passions without the burden of financial stress. She clicked to the first slide, showing photos of the foundation's scholarship recipients. Young painters, sculptors, photographers, all pursuing their dreams because of the program she'd built. What we've accomplished together has been remarkable. We've awarded over $20 million in scholarships. We've placed 50 artists in residencies at major museums and galleries. We've changed lives. Another slide. This one showed the foundation's growth over 5 years, the expanding budget, the increasing impact. But I want to be honest with you tonight about something. This foundation's success hasn't been despite the personal challenges some of you know I'm facing. It's been because of the values those challenges have reinforced, the importance of supporting each other, of creating opportunities, of remembering that our greatest achievements aren't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch. She could see Julian's expression darkening. This wasn't the speech she'd submitted for approval. I'm sharing this because I want you to know that regardless of what happens in my personal life, this foundation will continue. The work we've started together is too important to be derailed by anyone's individual circumstances. And I promise you, as long as I have any say in it, the Ashford Foundation will remain true to its mission. The applause was immediate and thunderous. Victoria smiled, accepted the ovation, and introduced the next speaker, one of their scholarship recipients, a talented photographer who'd gone on to have work featured in major galleries. As she left the stage, Victoria saw Isabel leaning close to Julian, whispering something. His face was red, his expression furious. Good, let him squirm. The rest of the evening blurred by in a whirlwind of conversations, photographs, and carefully managed public appearances. By the time the last guests departed and Victoria finally escaped to her hotel suite, it was nearly 2 a.m. She kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and checked her phone. Hundreds of messages. Most were supportive friends, acquaintances, even people she barely knew expressing admiration for her grace under pressure. Several were from journalists, requesting follow-up interviews, and one was from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. Take the settlement and move on. You can't win this fight. Isabel again, or maybe Julian. It didn't matter. Victoria blocked the number and opened her laptop. Chun had sent her an email an hour ago with the subject line, "Urgent call me." She dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "Please tell me you're still awake," he said. "Barely. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Victoria, your speech tonight, it was brilliant. It positioned you as the heart and soul of that foundation, while subtly undermining Julian's role. Social media is exploding with support for you. But that's not why I'm calling. Then why?" "I got a call an hour ago from Margaret Winchester." Victoria's heart skipped. Margaret Winchester was the billionaire widow who controlled one of the largest charitable trusts in the country. She was also notoriously selective about which causes she supported. What did she want? "She wants to meet with you. She's considering a $50 million donation to the Ashford Foundation, but only if you remain in control of it. She said, and I quote, "I don't invest in men who treat their wives like disposable assets. I invest in women who build legacies." Victoria sat down slowly, her mind reeling. That's game-changing. If Margaret Winchester publicly backs you, it sends a message to every other donor. The foundation is yours, not Julian's. He's just the money behind it. You're the vision. But the foundation has his name. Names can be changed. Especially if the majority of the board votes to distance the organization from Julian's personal scandal. Chun paused. Victoria, I think we can take the foundation from him entirely. Make it yours, the Patterson Foundation. Or whatever you want to call it. But under your control, with its own funding base, independent of Julian's money. The idea was staggering. To take something he'd used to make himself look good and transform it into her own legacy, separate from him entirely. What do I need to do? Meet with Margaret. Convince her you're serious about this. Then we go to the board and propose a restructure. If even half of them vote with you, Julian loses control. He'll fight it. Of course he will. But the beauty of this is that every time he fights to maintain control of a charity, he looks worse. Greedy. Petty. Exactly the opposite of the philanthropic image he's cultivated. Victoria thought about Julian's face during her speech, about the way he'd tried to control the narrative, about the years he'd let her do all the work while taking the credit. Set up the meeting with Margaret, she said. I'll convince her. I am, Victoria said, settling into the leather chair. Though the legal name change is still pending. Good. Never let a man's name define you, especially not when he's proven himself unworthy of the honor. Margaret poured tea from a delicate porcelain set. I've been watching your situation with great interest. Tell me, why should I invest $50 million in a foundation that might not exist in its current form 6 months from now? Victoria had prepared for this question. She opened her portfolio and slid it across the desk. Because it won't exist in its current form, I'm proposing a complete restructure. New name, new board majority, new mission statement that expands beyond what we've been doing. And most importantly, independence from Julian Ashford's control and money. Margaret's eyebrows rose. Bold, explain. For the next hour, Victoria laid out her vision. The foundation would become the Patterson Foundation for the Arts, honoring her family name and her late father, who had loved music and encouraged her artistic passions. It would maintain its scholarship programs but expand to include support for working artists, gallery spaces for emerging talent, and partnerships with schools in underserved communities. Julian's money built the foundation, Victoria explained, but his money also came with strings. Every decision had to serve his image, his networking needs. I want to build something that serves the artists themselves. And you believe you can secure funding without him? With your support as the cornerstone donor, yes. I have a list of 20 potential donors who've expressed interest in supporting a foundation led by me specifically. Several have explicitly said they were uncomfortable with Julian's involvement after the affair became public. Margaret studied the documents Victoria had provided. Financial projections, donor commitments, organizational charts. You've done your homework, she said finally. I've had a good teacher. The past 8 years taught me how to build an empire. I just didn't realize I was learning until I needed to build my own. Something shifted in Margaret's expression. A hint of approval, maybe even respect. My husband left me for his secretary 30 years ago, she said quietly. I was devastated. I thought my life was over. But I took my settlement, which was substantial, because I had a very good lawyer and I built something bigger than either of us had imagined. The Winchester Trust has donated over $2 billion to causes I care about. My ex-husband is remarried to his third wife and largely forgotten. I am a legacy. She stood, moving to the window overlooking her garden. You remind me of myself at that turning point, Victoria. Angry, yes, but channeling that anger into something constructive. Most women in your position take the money and disappear. You're choosing to fight. To build, that's rare. So you'll support the foundation? Margaret turned back to her, a slight smile on her lips. I'll do better than that. I'll give you $75 million over 3 years, contingent on the successful restructure and your retention of operational control. And I'll personally call 5 other donors I know who will match my commitment. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. That's incredibly generous. It's an investment. In you, in the arts, and in the message it sends to powerful men who think their wives are disposable. Margaret extended her hand. Show Julian Ashford that he didn't just lose a wife. He lost the best asset he ever had. The next board meeting of the Ashford Foundation was scheduled for the following week. In the interim, Victoria and Chun worked 18-hour days preparing their proposal. Julian tried to have the meeting cancelled. The board refused. He tried to have Victoria removed before the vote. The board refused. He sent his lawyers with threats of legal action if the foundation's structure was altered. Chun sent back a 40-page response documenting all the ways Julian had used foundation resources for personal business gain, a violation of non-profit regulations. The day of the meeting, Victoria arrived early at the foundation's offices in Midtown. The conference room was large and sleek, with windows overlooking the city. Julian had chosen this space, decorated it, and made it a reflection of his taste. Soon it would be gone, replaced with something new. The board members arrived one by one. Victoria greeted each of them, gauging their reactions. She had 4 solid votes in her favor, the women on the board who'd been quietly furious about Julian's behavior. She needed 1 more for a majority. Julian arrived last, flanked by 2 lawyers. He looked tired, Victoria noted with some satisfaction. The divorce battle was taking its toll. "Let's begin," said Patricia Morrison, the board chair and one of Victoria's allies. "Victoria has requested this meeting to propose a significant restructure of the foundation." "Victoria, the floor is yours." Victoria stood, projecting calm confidence even as her heart raced. "Thank you, Patricia. I'll be brief. The Ashford Foundation has accomplished remarkable things in 5 years. We've changed lives, supported artists, and made a real difference. But recent events have made it clear that the foundation's future success requires a separation from personal controversy." Julian's lawyer started to speak, but Patricia cut him off. "She has the floor," Victoria continued. "I'm proposing that the foundation be restructured as the Patterson Foundation for the Arts, with an expanded mission and new funding base. I've secured commitments for over $200 million from donors who specifically want to support a foundation led by me, independent of Julian Ashford." She distributed folders containing the details: Margaret Winchester's commitment, the other donor pledges, the revised mission statement. "This isn't about punishing Julian," Victoria said, meeting his eyes across the table. "It's about ensuring the foundation's work continues unimpaired by anyone's personal situation. The artists we support deserve better than to be caught in the middle of a divorce." "This is theft," Julian said coldly. "You're trying to steal an organization I funded." "I'm trying to save an organization I built," Victoria countered. "Your money provided the initial capital, yes. But every program, every partnership, every donor relationship, I created those. And the new donors I've secured will replace your financial contribution within 2 years. The board has fiduciary responsibility to act in the foundation's best interests," Patricia interrupted. "Which is exactly what we're doing. Let's vote." "All in favor of restructuring as proposed?" 4 hands went up immediately. The 4 women Victoria had counted on. One of the male board members, Thomas Chun, no relation to Robert, hesitated. He was a tech investor who'd been Julian's friend long before joining the board. "Thomas," Victoria said softly, "remember why you joined this board. You told me once that your daughter was an artist, that you wanted to support opportunities you couldn't give her when she was young. This restructure ensures that mission continues. I'm not asking you to choose sides in my divorce. I'm asking you to choose what's best for the artists." For a long moment, Thomas said nothing. Then slowly he raised his hand. 5 votes, a majority. Julian's face went white, then red. "This isn't over, actually," Chun said from where he'd been standing in the corner. "It is. The board has voted. The restructure is legal and binding. You can fight it in court, but that will only make you look worse, a billionaire trying to maintain control of a charity out of spite." "You manipulative," Julian started toward Victoria, but his lawyers grabbed his arms. "I'd be very careful about your next words," Chun said calmly. "We're documenting everything." Patricia stood. "This meeting is adjourned." "Julian, you'll receive formal notice of the board's decision within 48 hours. Your initial contribution will be recognized in all foundation materials. But operational control transfers to Victoria effective immediately." Julian left without another word, his lawyers trailing behind him like worried shadows. When they were gone, the 4 women who'd voted with Victoria surrounded her. "That took guts," said Margaret, who'd attended as a prospective donor. "That took evidence," said Patricia. "But yes, also guts." Thomas approached, looking uncomfortable. "Victoria, I hope this doesn't damage my relationship with Julian." "That's between you and him," Victoria said, not unkindly. "But thank you for voting your conscience." After they'd all left, Victoria stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the city. She'd done it. She'd taken something Julian thought was his and made it hers. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real battle, the divorce itself, was still ahead.